What is up, guys? So welcome to my review for the last 3 episodes of Young Justice Outsiders. Episode 24 titled Into the Breach, episode 25 titled Overwhelmed, and episode 26 titled Nevermore. Now this season overall I think has been a little shaky, certainly the worst season of this show, which isn't saying much because the first 2 seasons were amazing. This season is not as good, but it's still very, very good. But I think that while the season as a whole was kind of shaky, the last 3 episodes, the finale, the last hour of the show was really, really good. So let's start this video's reviews with episode 24 titled Into the Breach. So the episode begins with the Outsiders hanging out on their ship and trying to find out where they're supposed to go, and Cyborg talks about the upgrades he's gotten from the recent Metron thing. Now, since he debuted, Cyborg really hasn't gotten much to do, and he hasn't really done anything except for that Metron episode, but now, in this episode, he's basically, like it's mentioned later, the MVP. He's the main character of this episode, and this episode is by far his best episode so far. I mean, Cyborg is really cool here, and I really feel like he just became a much better character after this episode. So right away, that's something this episode did really, really well. I mean, going to the next season, I'm definitely a lot more excited to see more of Cyborg now than I was before watching this episode. So then the Outsiders find where Granny Goodness is, and while El Dorado stays behind, the rest of the Outsiders go there, and Cyborg hacks into the whole thing, and they get trapped in this other world. Again, I don't really know what it's called, but it's connected to the anti-life equation. It looks good visually, and I think this whole sequence of events really works, because when El Dorado does teleport in, and then he's unable to teleport out, it kind of feels a little bit claustrophobic there, so I think that was pretty cool. And then the ensuing fight between Beast Boy and Granny Goodness was fairly brutal. I mean, Beast Boy got his ass kicked. That definitely was expected, as Granny Goodness is a lot more powerful than him. She's an apocalyptic level character, while Beast Boy could really just turn into other animals, and also seemingly alien animals, which is pretty cool, something we haven't really seen a lot. It felt like a little bit like Ben 10, but it was pretty cool. I mean, Ben 10's pretty cool, but anyway, this fight was pretty brutal, and I think it worked really, really well. At the same time, there was another fight, a much more important fight, between Cyborg and the Overlord, which was also really, really cool, and it really showed how much better Cyborg is now as a character. I mean, this episode, like, a big part of it, or at least Cyborg's arc in this episode, was about accepting the fact that he's a cyborg and accepting his life now. I mean, you see that very clearly at the end, but that was obviously very evident in this fight as well, which visually looked really, really good. Like, the blue in the background, the way it was shown, it looked really good, and the fight overall was really, really good. In terms of these 2 fights, Beast Boy and Granny Goodness was very brutal, while Cyborg and Overlord was a lot, visually it was a lot better, and also was kind of a more exciting, I guess, but I think both of them were really good, and it worked really well for this whole sequence of events. But then Cyborg defeats the Overlord, destroys the Overlord's world, which I guess it's going to be called, and the Outsiders defeat Granny Goodness before she escapes back to the orphanage. And Cyborg does continue his MVP role as he goes along with Granny to the orphanage and sees Granny being combined with Granny Goodness, or Gretchen Good is combined with Granny Goodness into one Granny Goodness, which was a cool thing to see, and obviously that ends up being pretty important for Cyborg to see. And this everything we see after that is basically the ending of the anti-life equation storyline. So just basically looking at this, it seems like Darkseid isn't the main villain of this season. I mean, the Light is always the main villain, but there's always another villain, or at least in season 2. In season 2 is the Reach and Black Beetle. In season 3 it seemed like it was going to be Darkseid, but that is not true at all. While she doesn't last to the last episode, it seems like Granny Goodness was actually the main villain of this season, and because of that, I think that the season was actually pretty good. I thought throughout that Darkseid was going to be the main villain. The fact that Gretchen Good was so prominent, but Darkseid really never appeared. He never said anything. I don't think he had a single line and a voice actor at all. I thought that maybe like it wasn't going to end well, but considering Granny Goodness is the main villain, I thought it was actually, they handled the season-long storyline a lot better than I thought they did, so that is pretty cool. Even though she doesn't even really last to the last episode, I feel like this is kind of the finale, and then episodes 25 and 26 are the epilogue, and also 26 kind of feels like the prologue to season 4, but I thought that as kind of the finale of the season, episode 24, it was a tiny bit anticlimactic with the whole anti-life equation thing, but other than that, it's really, really good. So I'll touch on the anticlimactic part right now. So overall, I did really like this episode, but one part I didn't love is the anticlimactic ending to the anti-life equation storyline. I mean, there was no real fight between the heroes. I thought that would have been cool, even though it is very similar to the Starotech we saw at the end of Season 1. I thought maybe it could have been cool to see the Outsiders fight the Justice League and the team, but we got none of that. Cyborg showed up, he blasted the anti-life equation thingy off of Halo, and then she used her rainbow powers to reverse the effects of the anti-life equation on everyone, which I thought visually all of that looked really cool, and in the moment it was really cool to see, but I also felt like, I don't know, it could have been cool to see a fight between the Outsiders and the Justice League and the team, because they're under the control of the anti-life equation, and considering every episode in this season, the first letter, it spelled out prepare the anti-life equation, and while the anti-life equation did have a big role in the season, there was they didn't really end up being much of a threat at all, as like what we've seen. Who knows, maybe in Season 4 it will be, maybe this season was all about preparing the anti-life equation, so in Season 4 it can be used, which if that is true, which I feel like it might be, then I don't really have much of a problem with this. And overall, I thought it was a great episode and a fairly good ending to the storyline, but I can't help but feel like maybe it was a little bit anticlimactic, or at least it seems that way. But either way, I think visually it looks really cool. It felt great in the moment. It felt really cool in the moment, and then the fact that they actually win in this episode, it was pretty satisfying to see. And granted goodness, I thought it was a pretty good main villain who got a pretty cool ending where she was defeated by Halo and Cyborg, who in episode 25 is described as the grandchildren of Metron, kinda, and they're gonna have a big role to play in the war against Darkseid, which I am obviously very excited to see, and I'll talk about that more in the review for episode 25. But after destroying the orphanage and saving all of the metahuman teens, they go back to Earth to the Titan's Tower, and Cyborg becomes an official member of the Outsiders, and officially calls himself Cyborg, which was just such an awesome scene. I kind of got chills in the scene. It was really cool. Cyborg might end up being one of my favorite characters on the show just because of this episode. I mean, he was so cool in this episode, actually naming himself Cyborg and joining the Outsiders, which at this point, all it really needs is a Robin, and it really would be a Teen Titans, and Tim Drake is right there. I feel like that would really fit, and I mean, it's just really cool. So that was a great episode with a very good ending. I do have like a nitpick here or there. There was a part that felt anticlimactic, but overall I thought it was a great kind of season finale to this season, and I'd give it a 9.7 out of 10. So let's move on to the review for episode 25, titled Overwhelmed. So this episode had a lot of great things about it too. Most of it is set up to episode 26, and one part of it is huge closure for the show and a closure for a character, their death a whole season earlier, a couple of years ago when they died, even though I'm still not convinced that they are dead. Obviously that is Wally West. He returned yet again in this episode, yet again not really, as 2 episodes ago, I think it was episode 23, I mean it definitely was episode 23 where Wally returned in a hallucination. Great callback, great tribute to that character, and they did it yet again. And this time it's even better, as this time it's a lot more emotional. So the episode begins with Artemis going home and finding that Will set up a dinner for them, and they kiss, which has kind of been set up a lot this season, that they would become romantically involved, and this startles Artemis, so she goes to Zatanna to talk to Wally's spirit. And this whole scene, this whole storyline was very emotional. It was a great closure for Artemis, but also great closure for Wally West's death, even though considering the hint at the end of the next episode with the Legion of Superheroes, I'm not convinced he's dead, as the Legion of Superheroes coming back in time was a huge part of bringing Wally West back from the dead in the comics, in the Lightning Saga, and I definitely think that might be happening in season 4. But as although it was very expected that Wally would come back in the season, he didn't, and I'm kind of glad he didn't, as I really think that I don't know, it made his death feel a lot more real, even though I'm still again not convinced that he is dead. But I'm glad there was at least one season where he did stay dead, and they were able to do all these tributes to the character, like in this storyline where Artemis kind of sees what her life would have been if Wally didn't die. They get married, they have a kid together, and it was very emotional. I thought it worked really well for the closure for the character and the death of Wally West and the episode as well. Oh, and also Artemis goes back home after this whole thing with Wally, and Will and Artemis do not get together, which I was not opposed to them getting together. I know a lot of people were, but I personally wasn't. But at the same time, I thought this was a very different way to end the storyline than expected, but also I thought it definitely worked. But in another storyline, Superboy takes Forager to Nevermore City, or now it's called Geranium City. I had no idea we'd be seeing the Nevermores again, as we haven't seen them, I'm pretty sure, since the ending of Season 1, so this is definitely a throwback. There are a lot of those in this episode, and I mean, it's in the synopsis, that's really what they mentioned, that Superboy and Artemis go back to things in Season 1, which is definitely true. The Nevermores tell Forager and Superboy how their city was built, mainly Forager. I mean, Superboy already knows this as he was there, but they tell Superboy that he should become a public hero and help the Nevermores. And while I do think the storyline worked in the episode, I'm not really glad with the ending to it in terms of Forager's conclusion where he's staying. There were three options: either staying on the Outsiders, or actually becoming an outsider, becoming a public hero, or I guess another option was staying on the team. But also, two other options is staying in Geranium City or going back to New Genesis, and I would have preferred those two, as that means he would be off the show. I don't really dislike him that much, but I also don't like him. I feel like he's a little bit over the top, not really much of a character, doesn't really add much to the show. I feel like a conclusion to the whole thing was that he goes back to New Genesis. That would have worked, or maybe go to Geranium City. So I don't love the idea of him staying on the team anymore, but I do like the storyline and how it involves Superboy and how it ends with that character. And in yet another storyline, Metron takes Halo, Cyborg, and Leon to, it doesn't really have a name at all, and they don't even speak there. Other than Metron, Halo and Cyborg just make these mother box noises, but they tell them that they are his grandchildren. They are the children of his technology, and that they're going to have a big role in the upcoming Galactic War, which is definitely the war against Darkseid, probably the war between the Earth and the Apocalyptians, which I'm fairly excited for. This whole storyline was definitely really cool visually, and also how it set up Season 4, which I am definitely very excited for Season 4. Now that we know that the Legion of Superheroes is going to be involved, now that we know it seems like Darkseid is going to be the actual main villain of that season, I'm definitely very excited for that. And this whole thing, like I said, this episode kind of felt like a epilogue to Season 3, and this definitely felt like the epilogue to Season 3, as in the last episode, which kind of felt like the finale. The main two characters that saved the day were Halo and Cyborg. Mainly Cyborg, but also Halo she reversed the anti-life equation, so it seems like both of them are very connected to Apocalypse, which is true. They're both mother boxes or father boxes, kind of. So I thought this whole sequence of events, again, visually, it looks really cool. Set up Season 4 very well. It's a great epilogue to Season 3 and the finale in the last episode, so I thought that it was really, really good overall. I don't know why Leanne Harper was there. I don't really think she needed to be there. Maybe this will give her some powers or something, which could be pretty cool, but at the same time, she doesn't have powers in the comics, so I highly doubt it, and she was just there by circumstance. Anyway, that is a fairly good storyline. There are a couple of things that happened in this episode, like the light break Bedlam out of prison, and also Terra and G-Force talk to their brother about their country, but those I don't really have much to say about them. They were fine, they were a good setup for the next episode, but overall, this episode, while definitely, I think, being the weakest of the three, was still very good with a lot of great moments, and I'd give it a 9.3 out of 10. Moving on to episode 26, titled Nevermore, which it begins with Jefferson talking to Oracle about the situation in Markovia, where Bedlam took over and formed a coup and became the king of Markovia, and how the Justice League has been sidelined, so the Outsiders and also the team are going to stop him. So the Outsiders and the team go to Markovia to fight Baron Bedlam, which was a fairly interesting and also exciting way to start this episode, which, by the way, this episode went down in a much different way than I expected it, and I really liked it, so I'll talk about all of that in my review. So obviously a fight ensues between the Outsiders and the team against Baron Bedlam, which begins with one of the teams that they send being stopped by Count Vertigo until Nightwing stops him, and another one of the teams is straight up going up against Baron Bedlam. Throughout all of this, Deathstroke is trying to tell Terra to kill Beast Boy, which again goes down in a very different way than I expected it, as they kind of did the Judas contract in this season, but they kind of put a twist on it, as in the end Terra decides not to kill Beast Boy, and it also is revealed that the team and most of them already knew this entire time since the very beginning. So it's one of the first episodes of this season that Terra has been working with Deathstroke this entire time, and that they've been trying to make her feel welcome so that she doesn't betray them, so that now she doesn't kill Beast Boy, which I thought was a great twist on the Judas contract. I thought that, I mean, doing an exact comic storyline in like a movie or something, that works as it's an exact adaptation, but this show has never been an exact adaptation of anything. They've changed basically everything, or I mean a lot of things about a lot of storylines, so I'm actually very glad they didn't go through exactly with the Judas contract, but I also think that what they did here with Geoforce being kind of the Judas instead worked a lot better for this actual season. The actual fight here is pretty cool, the fight between Baron Bedlam and the Outsiders and the team. It's a very, very cool fight, and a great fight for the ending of the season, but what they did here is, like I said, Terra ended up not being the Judas, but instead it was kind of Geoforce. I mean, not really, it wasn't really the Judas contract per se, as he wasn't against the team this entire time, but he ended up killing Baron Bedlam and becoming the king of Markovia, kind of turning from the light, as you would say, but also I felt like it was a really intense moment. It was a great moment. It was really intense, and it was something that I just didn't expect at all. Geoforce has never had this storyline in the comics. He's always just been a straight up superhero. Terra, his sister, has always had this storyline. That's her main thing. She's a hero who is a villain this entire time, and she's a full-on villain usually, but Geoforce is a hero, and this has never happened, so this is something that I really didn't expect. Like I said, it was an incredibly intense moment, and it worked so well for the season. I've really never loved Geoforce as a character. Out of all the new characters, Geoforce, Forager, and Halo, those three, I never really liked them, but I'm glad they're doing something different with Geoforce, making him the villain, or a villain, in the upcoming season, kind of, or at least an antagonist, as, again, a very intense moment, something I did not expect at all. I really liked this, and the twist on the Judas contract storyline, and also I liked how it ended up working out just fine for the Light. Although this is not what they planned, it definitely ended very, very well. The Light always working in the shadows or in the background. This was very cool to see as well. Overall, this whole storyline, great ending, was very intense, very unexpected, and I really, really liked it. And also, pretty great fight scenes overall. But after everything that happened here, where Geoforce becomes king, the Justice League and Black Lightning mainly out Lex Luthor and everything he's done so far, while Superboy becomes a public hero, which was pretty cool, and it was all really satisfying. But there was one point where they mentioned that the public opinion about the Justice League is still pretty low, which I don't believe that. They literally just saved hundreds of teenagers from outer space. After something like that happens, I don't believe that public opinion would be as low at all, even though Lex Luthor has kind of been manipulating everything. I mean, everything was happening here with Lex Luthor being outed against everything and the Justice League just saving hundreds of teenagers. I really think that just doesn't make any sense that public opinion would be low anymore, and I feel like the Justice League in the next season should be free to do a lot more than they've been doing this season, and I feel like the public should really like them again after what happened in the last couple episodes. So that was one part that it didn't make any sense to me, but overall it was still a pretty good sequence of events, and was still very, very satisfying, as Black Lightning is then revealed to now be the leader of the Justice League, or not revealed, he becomes a leader. I mean, it was really cool to see all these heroes at the same time in the Watchtower. We haven't really seen that at all in the season, so that was really cool to see. The Justice League's back together, the Outsiders and the team, they're all back together, and they're all connected to the Justice League, and now that Black Lightning is the leader, which I felt really, really fit this season. It was not something that I would have expected before going into the season. Like before season 3, if Black Lightning became the main hero, or the leader of the Justice League, I would have been a little confused, but after this season and how they justified making him the leader, it makes a lot of sense. We see a scene with Connor and Megan getting back together, which is pretty cool. I think that whole storyline was kind of not necessary, but at the same time, I guess this was fine. But the heroes go to a cafe where they hang out for a while. One of the workers, who's definitely a girl, it seems like probably Saturn Girl or somebody else, it's most likely Saturn Girl, is serving coffee to one of the heroes. I'm pretty sure it was Miss Martian, but then you see the Legionnaire ring, the Legion of Superheroes ring on her finger. That is very exciting. I'm not going to say it's unexpected, as going into the next season, the main teenage superheroes that they can reveal, as every season reveals more teenage superheroes other than the Teen Titans, which they kind of already done a couple times. The Legion of Superheroes just made so much sense. Darkseid is the main villain of one of the most iconic Legion of Superheroes storylines. The Lightning Saga is also another Legion of Superheroes storyline where they bring back Wally West. I mean, going to season 4, this is something I definitely expected, but this scene was it was really exciting. The shot showing the Legion of Superheroes ring, it was very exciting, and I'm definitely a lot more excited for season 4 of Young Justice, exclusives than it was maybe a couple of weeks ago because of the last couple episodes and what they set up, but also because of this tease with the Legion of Superheroes, which is something I'm very excited to see. And also there's an end credit scene revealing that Lobo has returned after like a couple episodes of the credits showing Lobo's finger regenerating into a new Lobo. That Lobo baby is crushed and Lobo is now back, which I'm guessing we're going to see more of him in season 4, at least probably. So while there are a couple storylines that are unresolved, mainly the main one I'm thinking of is Jason Todd. He showed up and then he never showed up again. Also Damian Wayne and Talia al Ghul and Ra's al Ghul. I feel like we're going to see more of them in season 4. And there are other storylines I'm sure that were unresolved, but overall I thought this was a very good season. Not the best season of the show. In fact, it was probably not as good as seasons 1 or 2, but overall I think it stuck the landing at the end, so I'd give this episode a 9.8, maybe like a 9.7, equal I think to episode 24, 9.7 out of 10. So this has been a long video, but let me know your opinions on all 3 of these episodes. You could leave your opinion in the top right corner of the video in the polls, ranking or voting on which episode was your favorite, but also voting on what you thought about each one of those episodes. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.